nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. James Haskell along with my co-host Glenn Martin and our new friend of the show from Full Press Coverage Patriots, Mike Debate. Mike, thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime, guys. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to get some insider information and you know, from the Patriots' point of view, how this matchup looks coming into the Sunday night game. But before we get into it and ask you some questions, kind of put your feet to the fire when it comes to our internal Patriots debates and how you think this game will turn out. We want to let you guys pause for a second, hit the subscribe button, give us a like, and then throughout this video, make sure to leave your comments so that way we can interact with you guys. Also, if you're interested in interacting more, go ahead and check out our Patreon, and we'd be more than happy to present your questions to our guests like Mike and others. But Glenn, I'm going to let you kick it off here. Really excited to detail this game. So Glenn, why don't you get us started?
All right. Well, thanks again, Mike, for coming on with us. I'm going to take you back a couple months because I'm curious how the Patriots fans reacted to the departure of Mr. Tom Brady. I mean, were they surprised by him leaving, and how are they handling him finding some success as a Buccaneer?
To be totally honest with you, I think a lot of people were surprised. I don't think a lot of people were shocked. I mean, I think Patriots fans were preparing themselves for the fact that Tom may leave. I think at the end of the day, most people thought Brady would end up back in New England. It just seemed like the logical fit. It seemed like the way things were going to end for Belichick and Brady here in New England. Obviously, Tom's gone on to greener pastures in Tampa Bay. He's having a great season. Last game not withstanding. Obviously, that was a tough one for Brady and the Buccaneers against Breeze and the Saints, but they've had a great amount of success, and Brady still looks like he's more than capable of leading that team down in Tampa. Got a lot of weapons around him, something he didn't really have in New England last year, so it looks to be a good fit for him. As for the Patriots, for a while it looked like Jarrett Stidham was going to be given the keys to the kingdom and be Brady's successor. Then all of a sudden, Cam Newton emerged, and the Patriots were able to, bring him in. And since then, there was a rejuvenation of the Patriots fan base, and a lot of people started to believe that this team could contend and they could be in the thick of things in the AFC. Hasn't worked out exactly the way that we had hoped here in New England, but Cam has been playing a little bit better the last couple of weeks. The Patriots were able to eke out a win against the 0-9 Jets, so it's a little bit on the difficult side to see them celebrate a 3-point win over a team that normally they'd steamroll. But at the same time, it really has been an adjustment without Brady. So I know a lot of Patriots fans were sorry to see him go. He'll always be beloved in this region by the majority of the fan base. He'll get a few outliers that are a little upset with him for leaving, but ultimately life goes on, and that's what you're seeing here in New England. Bill Belichick, Cam Newton, and the Patriots brain trust now continue to move forward and trying to salvage a season that hasn't been what most people expected.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, an unorthodox one for a team like the Patriots. Yeah, I mean, with Cam Newton, them changing their entire offense and all those things going into it. But one of the things you talked about, Brady and Belichick kind of ending things together. One of the questions that I had was, how many years do you think Belichick has left in New England? And on top of that, do you think that Josh McDaniels is just the coach in waiting here? Is he similar to how we had Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta as the assistant GM? Really, we were paying two GMs at the same time for like 16 years or whatever the case ended up being, because we knew Eric was going to take over. Do you see that same thing? And how long is it going to take for that to happen? Does Bill have 2, 5, 10 years left? What do you think?
Well, right now, I think the only person that could really, truly answer that is Bill. And I know it sounds like a cop-out, but every time you seem to think that Bill is nearing the end, or he's starting to get tired, or he's ready to walk away, he looks rejuvenated and seems rejuvenated. And on his press conferences every single day, or whenever he addresses the media, he still sounds as engaged now as he always has. And if you know Bill Belichick, or if you've listened to him, you really can't tell that much difference in the man's voice inflections. It's really not a lot of enthusiasm being shown on his part, but he's very much engaged in what the Patriots are doing, seems to be talking about the future. So we leave that, to what it is and say, well, at this point, it seems like he's looking to, be back here for at least another couple of years. I know it's going to be important to him to catch John Shula's win total. He can say all he wants to that he doesn't talk about individual statistics, but that's got to be in the back of his mind. I think he would like to walk away from the game as the all-time winningest coach in NFL history, and he has a good shot to do that. I think if he continues to surround his team with the ability to compete, then I think Bill Belichick can coach for a number of more years. It's going to depend on the buy-in that he gets from Robert Kraft and ownership, which seems to be pretty good. Considering that it seems like they were able to, at least keep him around after Tom Brady's departure. And it's also going to depend on the type of players he's able to surround himself with. So I would think that Bill Belichick has at least a few years. You mentioned McDaniels. I know conventional wisdom of a lot of people say that he's the next head coach in waiting, but Josh is also not going to wait around forever. And if an opportunity presents itself, such as the Cleveland job this year that presented itself, he interviewed with that. Rumor has it he was very interested in the Carolina job before that went away. I think Josh is going to take the opportunity where he sees fit. That's the best fit for him. If that's in New England, all well and good. I think that might be his preference. But if Bill's going to stick around, I don't see Josh sticking around and just hanging around until Bill's ready to hang them up because, quite honestly, gentlemen, we really don't know when that's going to be.
Yeah, I thought it was funny you talked about Bill's, his enthusiasm in the media room because, like you said, he could be having a terrible day or the best day of his life, and it's probably pretty similar, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I've seen Bill lose it very, very seldom. I think a lot of people exaggerate that. They have the "we're on to Cincinnati" in their head, and everybody thinks that's how his press conferences are all the time. Bill Belichick is usually fairly, lighthearted and actually somewhat jovial sometimes with the media. He'll crack some dry jokes, and people don't get a chance to see that side of him. We do in New England, and we're fortunate for that. But at the same time, it's mostly a pretty monotone, pretty deadpan delivery. Bill is all business. And he acts like it when it comes to the business of the New England Patriots. But there are some times where you get a chance to see a little bit of Bill's personality, but it doesn't happen too often.
That's cool to hear that he has that side of him because I certainly did not know that here in Baltimore. Well, I've always been curious: who calls the actual defensive game? Is it Bill? Is it his son? Who actually makes the play calls?
Well, right now, I think they're sharing a lot of play calling duty. I think ultimately Bill Belichick is the architect, and most people will tell you that, oh, well, his son Steven is very much involved with it. Gerard Mayo, former Patriots linebacker, who's now coaching the linebackers and the middle part of that defense, are very much intricately involved in that. But ultimately, it goes through Bill. He's the architect of it. Steve Belichick has done play calling. He's done play calling at various points throughout the season. Mayo has also taken some of the play calling duties as well. So those guys are the guys that are calling the plays, but make no mistake about it, Bill's imprint is all over this defense.
And
what about?
I'm sorry. Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead, Glenn.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask. One of the things that I'm curious to know is just because this has been speculated upon. Bill right now is the GM and the head coach. He kind of runs it all. Do you see any world in which he steps down as the coach and purely runs the GM side of things? As a way to kind of phase himself out in the everyday responsibilities of coaching, but stay involved?
It's possible. I would probably say that if Bill had his preference, he'd probably rather step down as the GM and continue to coach. It's just in his blood. If having the opportunity to cover practices and watching Bill in practice with his defense, with his offense, with his players, and interacting, you can tell it's just in him. He just loves to do it. He's a teacher. He'll go in, show guys what to do, how to do it. He'll explain things, break plays down. One thing that I've learned in covering the media is if you ask Bill a football question about a play and a breakdown, it's hard to shut him up. It really is. I mean, it's hard to keep him from talking about that. His eyes light up when he gets to talk about breaking down plays and actually the X's and O's intricacy of football. I think the business aspect of it is what probably weighs him down a little bit. But at the same time, Bill likes having that control over his roster. So I think it's possible if he's trying to phase himself out that he may take on just those responsibilities. But my gut reaction tells me that when Bill's had it with football, he's probably had it on a business end of it and on the football field as well. So that's my guess, but wouldn't shock me to see him stay around and maintain GM duties after he's done coaching.
And with Belichick, kind of shopping for the groceries as well as cooking the meal, how confident are you when it looks like they're kind of entering a rebuild, but the Patriots haven't drafted a Pro Bowler since Jamie Collins in 2013. So how quickly do you expect the Patriots to be competing again for Super Bowls?
Well, a lot of it is going to determine on what they do this offseason. And I know a lot of people are looking at this year and saying, oh, well, he really didn't plan well here. The tight ends are a mess. He's not really doing a good job of restocking the middle of that defense. The wide receivers are taking a hit. A lot of people think that they're basically non existent. But the Patriots were hit harder by the COVID-19 opt-outs than any other team in professional football. That's a fact. And that's something that they could not have prognosticated. Another thing that they couldn't have really worked out is cap space. At the time that they paid Cam Newton, they paid him basically everything they could. The cupboard was bare when Cam signed that contract. They didn't get some more cap space until there were some opt-outs, and then it became obvious that the Patriots had a little bit more money to spend. At this point, I would say this offseason is really going to be a telltale for Bill Belichick. The draft is going to be big. It's going to be interesting to see how he chooses to rebuild this team. I think in a lot of other ways, you're going to see the Patriots flush with a lot of cap space. I'm seeing estimates is upwards of $70 to $80 million in cap space available. That's unheard of here in New England. That is an absolute financial windfall that I don't think anybody in New England since the Bill Belichick era began has ever seen. So it's going to be interesting how he invests that, who he chooses to bring in. We know Bill loves his veterans, so you can assume that he'll be bringing in savvy veterans that know his system and are going to be able to contribute. Not necessarily the biggest name out there, but the right players. I get asked this question a lot, and I keep coming back to Herb Brooks in the movie Miracle. And you guys, I'm sure, have seen that, and everybody knows the story of the USA Olympic hockey team. Herb Brooks didn't bring in the best players from the country. He brought in the right ones for his system. That's how Bill Belichick operates. And I think this season's going to be telltale. So if they can rebuild and restock, then this team's going to be right back into the thick of things within a year or two. If it's going to take a while, then you might be in for a longer term rebuild. And that's something that I don't know if Patriots fans, especially here in New England, are really going to embrace or maybe even be ready for.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a tough one. It's interesting because there's a little bit of a comparison because here in Baltimore, everyone's talking about the regression of Lamar Jackson and the offense in comparison to a historically incredible, statistically efficient offense last year. So now people have gotten spoiled. I'm sure that in New England there's a little bit of that too because they've been spoiled by this dynasty for so many years. But one of the things that you talked about when it comes to the rebuild, one of the things that you talked about earlier, that's going to be a big part of it is Cam Newton. Cam came in to New England with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, signing, of course, that 1-year deal, the idea of reviving his career. What have you seen from Cam since becoming a Patriot? And how will the Pats look to use his unique skill set? The other question I'll add on to that when it comes to rebuilding is, as a third one here, I'm giving you a real loaded question. Is there any noticeable interest in extending Cam Newton so that way they can focus on other pieces moving into that rebuild and all the cap space that they have this offseason?
That's a very good question, and I like the part and I like the tiers. First of all, when it comes to Cam Newton coming in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, an extra motivation, I think he's done that. And I think he came in, looked fairly efficient and fairly comfortable running the Patriots offense in the first 2 weeks. All of a sudden he gets placed on the COVID injured reserve, and that really set him back a little bit. I don't necessarily know, or I'm not willing to go out on a limb and say it was because of COVID that he had the difficulty that he had. I think it was the layoff. I think it threw his rhythm off. Cam is a creature of habit. He's someone that goes out there and practices religiously over and over again. He absorbs the playbook. He really works on repetition and muscle memory to be able to, be the type of quarterback that he is. I think the time that he had to spend away from the football field happened at one of the worst possible points because Cam was just starting to look comfortable and be comfortable in this offense. All of a sudden you miss a couple of weeks. You have to come back in now and try to hit it without a beat. This is a brand new offense for him. It's a brand new scheme, all new offensive weapons around him. And I think it was just difficult for him to get acclimated. So he struggled for a first couple of weeks coming back from that. The last 2 weeks against Buffalo and then again on Monday night against the Jets, I saw the return of the old Cam Newton. He was utilizing the zone reads that he's so adept at being able to use. He was using the RPOs and tucking and running when he needed to. He was getting the ball out of his hands quickly. That's something that Cam was not doing in his immediate return from the COVID-19 list. And he was also looking at and using the field a lot better. His mechanics were better. His eyesight and vision looked better. He was utilizing the right side of the field for a couple of weeks. It was almost like Cam was afraid to throw to the right side of the field. He used it very effectively on Monday. So I think the Cam is someone that can definitely lead this offense. I think the supporting cast around him is I'll be generous. I think average at best, but there are playmakers there. Demir Bird is someone that can, get open and make a play every now and then. Jacoby Myers has been a great surprise for the New England Patriots, and I think you'll hear his name a lot on Sunday night. But ultimately, I'm not sure if it's enough yet to warrant a contract extension. I think we're going to have to see from start to finish. The Patriots are not a team that usually does business in season, and I don't think Bill Belichick's going to start that now. I think he's going to evaluate what he's got in Cam, evaluate what other options are out there as well, and then make an educated decision as to where he wants to go in the future of this offense and especially this team. I, for one, would like to see Cam back because I think he's doing a fairly good job now, and having a full year under his belt could mean some good things. But ultimately, it's going to be the Patriots' call as to whether they want to bring him back.
Yeah, it's certainly be interesting to see what they do this offseason more than any that I can remember. I guess, well, last year was pretty big losing Tom. But on the other side of the ball, the defense for the Patriots was outstanding last season, led by, of course, Defensive Player of the Year, Stephon Gilmore. But this season, they look a lot different with a bunch of new faces. They had a few key players leaving free agency, and then you mentioned the many that left over the COVID-19 concerns, choosing to opt out. So what should Ravens fans expect to see from the 2020 version of this Patriots defense?
Well, the 2020 version of this Patriots defense is going to be similar to what they saw last year. The only problem is that they don't quite have the personnel that they had last year, and that's why they've struggled without any question. The secondary struggles have been a little bit surprising to me because that is the one area that everyone expected to be just as good or even better than it had been a year previously. Stephon Gilmore hasn't quite been the same player, but he's still a very key member of that defense. He always knows where all of the members of that secondary need to be. And I think in the last couple of weeks that he's missed, you've seen some of the struggles that especially a guy like J.C. Jackson, who a lot of people have speculated could be their number one corner next year if they decide to trade Stephon in the offseason. I would be dead set against that. Not as a knock to JC, but I just think that Stephon gives you that element and that shutdown corner and that savvy and experience that you need in the secondary. But the loss of Patrick Chung at the safety position is big for the Patriots. He is that secondary play caller. He's sort of the quarterback of that secondary. He'll let everyone know where they need to be. And even a guy that's as seasoned as Devin McCourty benefited from having a guy like Patrick Chung on the other side of him. Adrian Phillips has been good in that role, but he's played more of a hybrid linebacker at times because the Patriots are so thin at that position. There's a position where they've lost Jamie Collins, they've lost Kyle Van Noy, and they've lost Landon Roberts, and they haven't done a whole lot to replace those guys. So it's been a difficult fit at linebacker. I think Juwan Bentley has done the best job he can, but he's had injury issues, and he's missed a lot of tackles, but simply because he's playing out of position an awful lot. The other area where the Patriots have struggled is in the defensive front. A guy like Danny Shelton doesn't seem like a huge loss on the stat sheet when it comes to the nose tackle position in the interior of that defensive line. But having him in there as a run stopper was so big for the Patriots last year. They went out, brought in Carl Davis off of the Jaguars practice squad. They also recently claimed Isaiah Mack from the Tennessee Titans. These guys are big bodies that can come in and play nose tackle. Hopefully they'll be able to provide a little help for Adam Butler and Lawrence Guy, who's also been banged up on the other side of that interior of the defensive line. So a lot of moving pieces. They're definitely missing Chung. They're missing Hightower, and a lot of guys that have been in and out due to injury. It's been difficult to keep these guys healthy and keep them as a cohesive unit. At full strength, I still think this is a top tier defense in the NFL, not necessarily top 5 or maybe even top 10, but in the top half of the NFL. But without those guys healthy or consistent, you're seeing the struggles that they've been having this year. So this week against the Ravens, one of the more formidable running attacks in the league, as you guys well know, the Ravens would be who to try to test the Patriots in that area because they've really struggled to stop the run this year.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting one. Of course, we just played the number 1 rush attack, rush defense in Pittsburgh, and then number 2 in Indianapolis, and did well against both of them. So that's got to be something, like you said, the Patriots are looking at most certainly. One of the things we wanted to ask you, as far as big picture, kind of taking a step back. In Baltimore, we've always considered Pittsburgh, of course, to be our rivals. However, I will say, if I had to name our next rival of the past 15 years, might be the New England Patriots. One of the things I always bring up is, the playoff losses. If I'm not mistaken, I think Bill has 4 playoff losses in New England, and half of those have come from John Harbaugh, which is a pretty cool stat. I think it's somewhere around there, unless that's changed. But does the New England fan base view Baltimore similarly? That it might not be their biggest rival, but one of their biggest, as far as in the postseason and things like that?
Yeah, I can tell you the Baltimore Ravens logo is one that instills some fear in the hearts of Patriots Nation, and it has for a while. Look, you go back to the days of Ray Rice coming in and running all over the Patriots in the playoffs, and some of the hard-fought victories and defeats that these two teams have had against one another. There's definitely a lot of mutual respect, I would say. I can definitely tell you on behalf of Patriots fans, there's a lot of respect for the Ravens, the organization, and the job that they're able to do year after year. But I can tell you in that Patriots locker room, there's an equal amount of respect. I would say, yeah, they're definitely up there in terms of the rivals that the Patriots have had throughout the years. And again, one that instills a little bit of fear in Patriots Nation, because they're one of the few franchises that have had regular season and postseason success against New England. Not many teams can claim that in the last 20 years. Baltimore can claim it, and they can claim it pretty steadily. So anytime a team has your number in that sense, you always have to tip your cap to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think it's gonna be a fun one this weekend. I'm excited, but I wanted to get your take from a New England perspective on the Ravens. It's always nice to hear other people's perspective, and obviously last season was historic for the Ravens offense and didn't end the way they envisioned it. This year, numbers are a little bit down, but still at the exact same place in the win column as they were last season. So what's your take on the Ravens this season versus last, and how do you see the rest of the season playing out for the Ravens?
Well, conventional wisdom would tell you that the first thing that you think of when you think of the Baltimore Ravens and their legacy is defense. I mean, the first thing that I think of is Ray Lewis and coming out, and that defense that absolutely was a monster to be able to try to put points on between Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. I mean, two of the greatest players I've ever seen in my lifetime. They still have a very impressive defensive front. I'm really a big fan of Derek Wolfe, Brandon Williams. I think Calais Campbell is fit very well. I know he's strained a calf muscle, and he's, I think, questionable at best, if not out for Sunday's game, which is a loss for the Ravens. But Maduga Bay coming in, playing well for them. I think they do a great job of protecting their linebackers. And I do think that secondary definitely is, more than formidable. I mean, they definitely have the capability of shutting you down with Jimmy Smith, Marcus Peters, you got Marlon Humphrey back there. So, I mean, a lot of great players on the Ravens defense. On offense, what can you say about Lamar Jackson? I mean, he's coming off of a unanimous MVP season. I know he hasn't put up the type of season that I think a lot of people expected him to, being in the MVP candidacy discussion, but I think he's still in the very, very top handful of quarterbacks in the league. So dangerous on the ground. I mean, your quarterback leads the team with 469 yards rushing and a 5.9 yard average on the ground. That is extremely, extremely impressive. And I think that they've got, some guys that can make plays through the air as well. I don't think the Ravens ever really get enough credit for that, between Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews and Willie Snead. These guys can make plays, and I think they can make life difficult on that Patriots secondary this weekend. So I look for the Ravens ultimately to be right in the thick of things, right in the contention for an AFC title. I think they've got the horses on both sides of the ball to be able to challenge teams like Kansas City and Pittsburgh right now that are really sort of pulling away from the pack. But I see the Ravens right up there with those guys, especially in the postseason. I know it was a little bit of a difficult and disheartening exit last year for Baltimore, but I think sometimes losses like that can make you a little more battle tested. I'm curious to see how they're going to do in the playoffs this year and respond to that.
Yeah, I think we all are. Certainly in Baltimore, it's gonna be a stressful time. But I forgot to ask you one question about the running back room, because it's kind of similar here in Baltimore, where we had so many guys. And I remember commenting, I think the Patriots, if I remember back right, they broke camp with like 5 running backs. And I remember thinking it was shocking for us to break camp with 4. So I know that Damian Harris left last game with a chest injury, but it looked like he was able to get in a limited practice. So what should Ravens fans expect? Who should they expect to be in the backfield, and who do you think will make the most impact in this game?
Well, right now, the Patriots running game is their strength, without any question. I mean, they've had some very adept runners this year that have really come in and done great things. Damian Harris has been one of the breaths of fresh air in this team, and he's been so adept at being able to run the football. He exited Monday night's game with a chest injury, and right now we're awaiting more information on Damian as to whether or not he'll be able to go in this one and how limited he'll be in practice. So if he's going to be out, the Patriots still have guys that can run the football. Sony Michel, for all of the criticism, I guess is the best way for me to put it, that he gets up here, is still a running back that can get you yardage on the ground. The last game that he played, he rushed for 117 yards. So this is a guy that can clearly gain some yardage on the ground. Rex Burkhead and James White are one of the best two combinations in the league at being able to catch the ball out of the backfield. So I look for them to get some looks as well. And their undrafted rookie free agent, J.J. Taylor, has been out last couple of weeks with an illness, but he's very shifty and someone who's small. Reminds me a lot of Dion Lewis when he played here in New England. He can get some yardage as well. So the run defense for the Ravens are, definitely, like I said, I'm a huge fan of their defensive front, and I think they'll be able to look at what these guys do well and try to take it away. But the Patriots running backs have a way of being able to find yardage just when people think they can't. So if there's a good matchup or a matchup to keep your eye on this weekend, it might be the Patriots running backs against that Ravens defensive front.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. And I think that rolls right into our next question here. What do you think the Patriots need to do to come out of this game with a victory?
Well, they would need to establish the run first. They're going to have to hope that the loss of Calais Campbell, if he's not able to go, is able to give the Patriots a little extra and be able to find seams in that Baltimore defensive front. If they can do that and establish the run early, that may help to open up things for Cam Newton to be able to utilize zone reads, utilize RPOs, and maybe get some yardage through the air by finding guys like Jacoby Myers and Damiere Byrd in short yardage situations. Ultimately, on defense, controlling Lamar Jackson is going to be a very, very tall task. The Patriots generally don't do well defending very mobile quarterbacks. We saw this last year when these two teams played one another. It was a nightmarish type of matchup for the Patriots defense to try to contain Lamar and some of the great running backs that they have. Mark Ingram, we're still unsure about his status. At least we are here in New England. So at that point, establishing the run on offense and trying to open things up could be interesting. But on defense, it's going to be about trying to stop the Ravens' ground game. And that's easier said than done, because even if you try to stop one, they have so many guys that can go ahead and take the mantra and take the ball and run with it, literally, whether it be Gus Edwards, whether it be J.K. Dobbins, rookie, he stepped up big. This is going to be a tough one for the Patriots. I would think that if they can try to limit the running of Baltimore, then they have a shot. But if they're not able to do that, it could be a long night in Foxborough coming up for the hometown team.
Well, Mike, can we get your prediction? That's what they need to do. But what will actually happen Sunday night?
I think at the end of the day, I think the ground attack for the Baltimore Ravens is just going to be a little bit too much for the New England Patriots. I think they had a little bit of an uplifting game, but at the same time, I caution my listeners that it was the Jets. It's not the Ravens that they were playing on Sunday. I think the Ravens are able to find success on the ground, and I think they're able to do just enough to contain the Patriots on offense. I would probably say Baltimore takes this one 24-17 over the hometown team on Sunday night.
That's interesting. A lot of folks aren't willing to give us a score this early in the week, so I like that, Mike. Appreciate that. That's it's exciting. With 24-17, if you are closer than Glenn and I, we'll be sure to give you a shout out in our recap game, in our recap episode. So that's awesome. We appreciate you coming on the show. I'm really excited to view this game Sunday evening, nationally televised game. Why don't you let the folks here in Ravens Nation know what you're working on and where they can find what it is that you're working on?
Okay, well, if you're interested in the chess match between the New England Patriots and the Baltimore Ravens, definitely check out the Locked On Podcast Network. I host Locked On Patriots each and every day, Monday through Friday. Tomorrow is Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network. Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire and, of course, of Locked On Ravens and I will be breaking down the X's and O's on this one, giving our game predictions. And, of course, throughout the rest of the week, I'll continue to monitor everything that's going on from the Patriots camp. And, yeah, definitely check out the Locked On Podcast Network wherever you get your podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Apple. We're on all of those platforms. Download and subscribe.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll make sure to leave the link in our description below, so that way you folks can easily access it. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.